Welcome to Learning Guitar. My name is Clay Motley, and in this course, you're going to learn something about playing guitar. Now, whether you're a total beginner, or maybe you just haven't played in a while, or maybe you taught yourself and you want to fill in some of the gaps you may have missed, these videos are for you. So I've been a professional musician for over 20 years, performing, writing, even recording, and of course, teaching. And I'm excited that you've chosen to spend a few minutes with me today, so let's get started. Let's talk about this awesome instrument, the guitar. There are lots of many shapes and sizes and styles that these guitars are built in, but they can all be broken down into two categories: acoustic or electric. The notes that you're going to learn are the same on both, so it doesn't really matter which one you have to learn on. But let's talk about these differences. The real difference in these two is how they're designed to produce sound. Acoustic guitars have a hollow body, this hollow box, which resonates the sound made by vibrating strings. Electric guitars, on the other hand, have magnetic coils that pick up the vibrating strings and send it through electricity through a cable to an amplifier to make it louder. Now, it's a common myth that electric guitars don't make any sound when they're not plugged in. They actually do. But it's so quiet, it really can't even be heard over even a casual conversation. So let's talk about the pieces and parts of these guitars so that we all are on the same page when it comes to the terminology of what we're talking about. Most of the parts are going to be called the same, but there are some differences. Starting with the acoustic guitar, we have the headstock, that's this part up here at the top, these tuning pegs. We have the nut, which is this plastic piece here. We have frets on a fretboard. Frets are the metal bars that go up and down here. We have the strings. We have the body of the guitar. We have a sound hole, a pick guard, the saddle, which is this white piece here, and the bridge, which is this part back here. And then some of you may have a strap knob here or a strap knob here to hold the guitar up for you. You may not have those. Acoustic guitars are lighter than the electrics, but even though the body size can be a little bigger. You don't really need electricity to hear the sound. And the strings are a little bit thicker and can be harder to bend and to squeeze when you go play. But don't worry, your fingers will get used to it really quickly. Now let's take a look at the electric guitar. Similarly, we have a headstock, we have tuning pegs, we have a nut, we have frets on a fretboard, we have strings, we have the body, although there's no sound hole. We have pickups, which are these usually metal-looking pieces here. We have a pickup selector switch, which tells the guitar which one of these you want to use, and sometimes a combination of both. We have volume and tone knobs. There's an output jack on different places. The saddle and the bridge look a little differently, but they're here. And then strap buttons that may be here. Your electric guitar may also have something called a tremolo bar, which is a bar that usually attaches here or is permanently built in. Now, even though electric guitars are thinner, they're actually heavier than they appear. The strings are also really thin, so they're easier to bend at first, but really you can't hear them without an amp and a cable and electricity, so just something to think about. Now, a couple of other items that go with guitar are picks. I've got one in my hand here, and I've got several here. Picks come in a variety of shapes and sizes that you can use. We've got a strap that wraps around. I don't have one here today, but that holds your guitar in place. We have a capo, which I have on the end of my guitar, and we'll talk about this in a later video. Capos clamp down on the strings to help you play in certain keys a little easier. We have a set of strings, which you may have in there. We have string winders and cutters and all kinds of little implements for playing guitar. Now, you can play guitar standing or sitting, but either way, there's some important things about posture that you need to pay attention to. You want to position yourself so that you feel comfortable with the guitar. You can reach over the body. You can see the fretboard, even if you have to lean it just a little bit back. Especially if you're younger or smaller, these big guitars may be a little too big for you right now. You can certainly press on and learn to play it anyway, but if you have the choice, try to get a guitar that fits you whenever you can when you start. Now remember, if this is a new thing for you, it will get more comfortable. Remember that first time typing on a keyboard or getting behind the wheel of a car maybe? Keep at it, and little by little, it will soon feel second nature to you and very comfortable. So let's talk about guitar picks. Now, many players use picks. like these. Other people use finger picks, which slide onto the end and kind of make use of your fingernail instead. And then many, like myself, go back and forth between finger picks or finger style, whether you use the picks or not. For a majority of what we'll be learning in the beginning, it's a good idea to use what's called a flat pick. There's just these regular picks that we have. There's a finger style approach that I really love, but that's going to come down the line. So we're just going to start with picks for now. They come in a variety of thicknesses, colors, textures. Thicker picks make the strings play a little louder, like this one does, but it's more easy to get knocked out of your hand. Thinner picks have a sort of a paper kind of a sound because they give really easily on the string. You hear the click a little bit more. Experiment with what you like and see whichever you prefer. They're cheap. You can get them at any music store or online. So experiment, find the ones that you like, and try different ones. If you lose them or run out, you can use old credit cards cut into certain shapes. You can use small, thicker, sturdier pieces of cardboard even. Just have a bunch. I place the pick between my thumb and my pointer right on the side of the first knuckle, right here. I have the point of the pick pointing away from my palm so that it makes about a 90-degree angle with my hand. Grip it firm, but not too tight. It should give just a little when it makes contact with the strings, but not so much that it pops out and falls on the ground. And believe me, it will fall out. That's okay. That's just a learning process. This is natural. It'll happen less and less the more you play. Because you could be left-handed or right-handed, I'm going to use the term fret hand and strum hand or pick hand. The fret hand is the one that presses down on the strings. It is on this side. If you play right-handed, that would be your left hand. The pick hand is the one or strum hand is the one that strums or picks the strings, and that is my right hand. If you play left-handed, this will be opposite for you. For most people, it's going to be this setup here. Your left hand is the fret hand, your pick hand is your right hand. Now, the fret hand is what's used to squeeze the strings. Let's learn how to do that. What we're going to do is curl your fingers so they point back at the neck. You don't want to do them flat, although that will come later. Use the tip of your finger to press the string against the fretboard. Now, try not to use the pad of your finger, though. There'll be cases where we do that later, but for now, you want to use the tip of your finger. Try to get your finger as close to the fret as you can without going over it. Don't go over. Stay right behind the pick. Take your pick, pluck the same string that your neck has on. I'm on the bottom string here, so I'm going to use the bottom string here. Ta-da. Now, if you don't hear that sound, first double check that your pick is on the same string that your finger is on. Next, check that nothing is leaning against it, maybe another finger or a sleeve or something. And then check that your finger is as close to the fret as you can. You might need to slide down. And then if that doesn't work, squeeze just a little bit harder. If you still don't get a good sound, you might just need to squeeze a little harder still. Notice that my fret thumb is behind the fretboard where my fingers are playing, somewhat underneath the fingers. Keeping the thumb in this area will help your strings sound better without having to squeeze as hard. Keeping your thumb back here, you get that leverage between your hands here. Now, if you hear a short snapping or pluck sound, that just means the string isn't vibrating. Try squeezing it a little harder or slide closer to the fret. If you slide closer to the fret, you may not have to squeeze harder. Now, if you're using the base of your strings and you get a buzzing sound, then you're squeezing hard but not quite hard enough. Or you might just need to move it a little closer to the fret. In rare cases, if your guitar has been maybe sitting in a hot attic or a cold basement, your guitar may have become warped to the point that it can't be played without that buzz sound. To check for this, try making notes in various places. Does it work on some notes and not others? Does it sound the same anywhere else on the guitar? How about on other strings? If it always buzzes no matter what you do and you're squeezing as hard as you can, you might need to have that guitar looked at. Ask a friend who plays guitar, maybe go online to your local music area, look for a luthier, or just find someone who plays and maybe they can take a look and see if your guitar is repairable or maybe it's time to retire it and look for a new one. Now, if you have an electric guitar and you still don't hear any sound, then you might need to check some other things like the amplifier. Is your cable plugged in all the way? Is the volume turned up? Is it selected to the right pickup selector where that volume is turned up? So check all of those things. Once you have a clean sound on your guitar, congratulations! You are a guitar player. You know how to make sound on a guitar. That's all it takes. So let's talk about the strings. Strings on this guitar have both a number and a letter to identify it based on how it's usually tuned. Now that number is 1 through 6 because we have a 6-string guitar. Beginning at the thinnest, the highest sounding string, which is here on the bottom, and moving towards the thickest or the lower strings. So we'll talk about the letters in a future video. So for now, let's just talk about the numbers. The first string is closest to the ground, closest to the floor, like the first floor of a building. And the second string is right above it, followed by the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth at the top. It doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. The first string should be the thinnest string, and it should be on the bottom. The sixth string is the thickest and should be on the top. But let's improve on just playing one note. Your first exercise is to use your pointer on the bottom or first string. Place your pointer on any fret on the first string. I'm going to use the 3rd fret here, but you can use any fret that you want as your starting point. What we're going to do is play this first note until you get a clean ringing tone. If yours, make sure you get a nice ringing tone. Tip of your finger close to the fret. Those typically are the things that we mess up. Next, we're going to take our middle finger and play it on the next fret. For me, that's the 4th fret. It might be higher for you depending on where you play. Keep going with the ring finger and then the pinky. So I'm up to my 6th fret here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with my pinky, and I got a nice clean sound. Now that we've got that, we're going to play this exact same thing backwards. Start with your pinky, move to your ring finger, middle, and pointer. This is your first exercise that you need to repeat several times. Stay on the first string, practice moving up and down, using all 4 fingers. It's likely that your pinky will have the most trouble, but that's the reason, all the more reason, to make sure you're practicing with it more often. Now, to make this exercise a little bit more exciting, move up and down 1 fret after each round. So if I start on the 3rd fret here, I'm going to go back down, and now I'm going to move to the 4th fret. And now to the 5th fret. Let's look at our pick hand for a moment. It doesn't matter if you pick the string on a downward direction or an upward direction. Whichever you choose to start is fine, but make sure you rotate. If you start with a down pick, then the next note should be played with an up pick. Or if you start with an up pick, the next one should be a down pick. You'll need to be able to play in both directions, so make sure that you're not just practicing one. Rotate up and down every single note you play. Now, once you've given this some practice, it's time for our second exercise, which is very similar, but a little bit more challenging. We're going to move to the 2nd string. Now, be sure both the finger on your fret hand and the pick have moved up to that 2nd string. Repeat this exercise starting in any fret that you want. I'm going to start on the 2nd fret this time. Up and down with the pick, all 4 fingers, making sure that they have a nice, clean sound. You can move up and down a fret. Up and down a fret. This is a great exercise, and even professional players do things like this to get warmed up and get started. You'll very likely find that your pick hand doesn't always hit the correct string that you're trying to play, and that's okay. Keep at it. It will get better with practice. Practice making these run of clean notes on all 6 strings with all 4 of your fingers. Take your time, don't rush necessarily. It's not about getting it done quickly right now. What you should be focusing on is making sure that every note sounds clean and rings out, and that your pick hand is matching with your fret hand. It takes lots of repetition, so just keep at it. You can do it. Now, people often ask, how much should I practice? Well, the answer is as often as you can. There's no magic amount of time that makes you good or proficient. What seems to work the fastest, though, is to practice as often as you can, even if it's only for a few minutes at a time. If you only have time to play up and down on 1 string, then do that. If you can do it on 2 strings, even better. But don't say, I don't have 30 minutes. Take 2 minutes. Take 5 minutes. More is definitely better, but consistency is the best. 10 minutes every day usually shows more progress than 90 minutes done once a week. So keep that in mind. A couple of minutes here and there can really do wonders. Okay, so we want to talk about the names of these strings and what they do, and that's going to involve something called tuning. A guitar can be tuned in any number of ways to create all kinds of beautiful and unusual sounds. But when you change the tuning, you change how you have to play the notes and the strings and the chords and things. For our purposes, we're going to use what we call standard tuning, and it's what most guitars and most guitarists use on the things that you hear on music. Before we get there, though, we need to learn a little bit about music and the names of these notes so that we don't tune it to the wrong thing. If you don't learn this, you can actually break a string while trying to tune it. So let's take a second to look at that. In most of the world, we divide all of the notes and tones that we hear into 12 unique notes, each with a different name. But we only have 7 names that we use to describe them. Those names you already know: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. They continue in a never-ending spiral, A through G. And after G, a higher sounding A is produced, then a higher B and C and D and E and G. We call these notes natural notes. On a 6-string guitar, the strings are E, starting at the bottom, B, G, D, A, and low E. Now you may notice we don't have a string named C or F. We'll learn how to play those notes later, but there are no strings tuned to that in standard tuning. Now you may remember I said there were 12 unique notes, but so far I've only given you 7 unique names. The other 5 are what we call accidentals, but they have the same names as we just add a sharp or a flat after them. Sharps and flats are like the halfway points between 2 notes. So if you listen to the A note, then the B note, they sound pretty close together, but there's actually a note in between. That's the accidental. That's the sharp or the flat. Now what's really interesting is that sharps and flats are the very same note. This halfway note is both a sharp and a flat. Let me show you why. We use the word sharp to mean higher, and it's represented by a symbol that kind of looks like a hashtag or a pound sign. This note between A and B is higher than A, so we call it A sharp. This is A sharp. But this very same note is lower than B, so we also call it B flat. Flat is represented by what looks like a lowercase b that's sort of been slanted up a little bit. So sharp means higher, flat means lower. The halfway point is both a sharp and a flat depending on what the note it's in between. It's the same note with 2 different names. A sharp, B flat, A. For now, it's not important that you know when to call it which. You just need to know that these notes have accidentals. Okay? Now, we've already discussed the accidental between A and B, but there are others. There's one between C and D. There's one between D and E. Between F and G, and between G and A. However, there are no accidentals between B and C and E and F. I wish I could tell you there was some secret method to remember this, but I don't know of one. So you just have to remember that B and C are neighbors and don't have an accidental between them, and so are E and F. There's no accidental, there's no sharp or flat between B and C or E and F. If you ever played piano or seen a piano, this is very visual. All the black notes are the accidentals. Those are the sharps and flats. And there aren't any between B and C. If you look at B and C and E and F, there's no black note there. And so on guitar, though, there's nothing really to look at to show that. It's just something you have to remember. So now that we know that, we can take a look at how the guitar is tuned, and more importantly, how to fix it if it's not right. We need something to tell us if our guitar is tuned or not, and you can use a variety of things for this. You can use a tuner, you can use a tuning fork, a pitch pipe, a tuning app on your phone, or another instrument that you know is tuned correctly. You can also ask someone with perfect pitch if they can tell you if that's right or not. We don't have access to that right now, so we're going to use a tuner. I like using pedal tuners, which look like these. There's a bunch of different varieties, and you plug them in, and on the screen here, when they're powered in, they tell you exactly if the note's right or not. These are great, but they do require to be plugged in, but they're great on stage because they can drop out all the other sound. Since everyone can't plug in their guitar to do that, we're going to use the concept, we're going to use a different kind of a tuner, but the concept's the same no matter what kind of tuner you have. There are also smaller clip-on tuners that you can mount right to your guitar as well. So I'm going to use my tuning app on my phone here because it's a way I can show you what this is going to look like. Both the tuners and the tuner apps have a small microphone that it's using to listen to the sound of the notes that's being played. So you may need to allow for your device permission if you're using an app to access the microphone. If you're prompted to do that, it needs to be able to hear the sound of the note to know if you're playing it right or not. Ooh. Knowing what kind of guitar you have can help. If you have a simple guitar tuner, it will only be looking for one of the 6 notes on the guitar, the E, B, G, D, A, and E. If you have a more advanced tuner called a chromatic tuner, which is what this app is, then it will try to tune to the closest note, which may or may not be the one you want to get if your guitar's gotten way out of tune. If it's gotten really low or really high, it may be trying to get you to a note that's not correct. So this is why it's important to know what names of the notes, what names the strings are, and what you're trying to tune. There are signs on the tuner, arrows that point left or right to tell you whether or not it's sharp or flat, but make sure that it's tuning for the correct string first. Okay, to start, we're going to start with the E string. So I'm going to play an E, and it's telling me that there's an E right there, and the line is pretty close, but it's a little bit too high, and you can see that red arrow just a little higher than straight up. So I'm going to lower that down just a little bit. Now look at that. I've lowered it way too far. Now our arrow has gone way to the right. So I need to tighten it back up again. Now I've gone too high. There we go. Usually it turns green to tell you that it's right, or it points straight up and down. Some arrows have 2 arrows that point together that say now we're tuned. You don't have to go one way or the other. That's how you tune, and we go to each string to do that. Let's try the next string, B. Pretty good. It's a little bit low. It's still green, but it's the red arrow you can see sort of slides down just a little. So we'll raise that up just a little bit. If you're not sure which way to turn the strings, just try it. Turn it a quarter turn or a half turn and see which way the tuner tells you, and then you may have to turn it the other direction. How you put the strings on the guitar determines which way you should tune it. So let's play it again. A little flat still. A little sharp. Pretty close right there. Get it as close as you can, but don't spend a ton of time trying to get it exactly perfect. As long as the closer you get it, great, but once you get into a certain degree, it's going to sound good. Let's do the rest of the strings now. Now, if you tried to tune a note and what you saw on your screen was not the note you're trying to tune, you were trying to tune a B, but it actually said A flat. Well, you have to go back to knowing the direction of the notes, the order of the strings that we talked about before. If you're trying to tune a B and the tuner was telling you it's an A flat, even though it says it's too high, you need to remember this needs to go up because A flat is too low from B. I need to raise that up. And so when you raise that up, or B flat is too low from B, so I need to raise that higher until it gets there. If you're trying to tune E, but it's telling you it's an F, then you need to lower that down no matter what it says on the directions, because you are tuning a string that the tuner says is not the one that you're trying to do. So pay attention to that letter that the tuner shows so that you can get it right when it's time to string it. It takes some practice and some time getting familiar with tuning, but like anything else, the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get, and you'll be able to do this really quickly anytime you need to tune your guitar. Nicer guitars, if they're more expensive and better made, they will stay in tune a lot better, but it's still made of wood, and so humidity, weather, temperature all adjust and make the wood change just a little bit. And so it's very likely you're going to have to tune it or check the tuning every time you play it. And if you're playing it for a few hours, maybe while you're playing it, as you're hitting the string, as it starts to twist and turn just a little bit. It's something that you'll have to do all the time, so just get used to doing that. Now, one more note about tuning. As your strings get older, they often go out of tune much more easily. So if you've had these strings on your guitar for a while, you may want to think about changing them. Do you remember the names of the strings? E, B, G, D, A, E. Everybody goes down an elevator. Maybe that's one way to remember it. Or you can learn them 6 to 1, which is low to high. Every amateur does get better eventually. Any saying that you want to use to help you remember the name is great. In either case, just know which string you're trying to tune and that the tuner is working on the same one. Play the strings from top to bottom, one string at a time. You'll get very familiar with this sound, and over the years, you'll likely be able to tell if a string is out of tune just by listening to it. It all comes with time and practice, so be patient, keep at it, and you'll get there.